Good evening. Wherever you are in the world, welcome. Take a deep breath and allow the day to slowly fade away. I'm curious, where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Is it late evening, or are you already drifting into sleep? Tonight, we descend into Duat, the ancient Egyptian underworld, a realm of shadows, gods, trials, and eternal silence. You don't need to stay awake. You don't need to focus. Simply listen and let the story carry you gently into rest. The Duat was never meant to frighten. That is the first thing the ancient Egyptians understood. The Duat was not created as a punishment, nor as a shadow meant to terrify the living into obedience. It was created because the universe required a place where movement could pause without collapsing. To the Egyptians, nothing truly stopped. The sun did not vanish at night. Life did not end at death. Order did not dissolve when darkness arrived. Instead, everything withdrew inward, entering a hidden structure that allowed existence to continue without chaos. That hidden structure was the Duat. The Duat was not underground in the way caves or tombs were underground. It was beneath reality itself, folded behind the visible world like a second layer of night. It emerged every evening when the sun set and sealed itself again at dawn. You did not travel to the Duat. You passed through it. This distinction matters deeply. The Egyptians did not imagine death as a relocation. They imagined it as transition into a different mode of being. The Duat was not a destination. It was a process space, a corridor between states, a system designed to carry gods and souls safely through darkness. Without the Duat, night would destroy the sun. Without the Duat, death would scatter the soul. Without the Duat, chaos would leak into daylight. This is why the Duat existed. Long before it was associated with judgment or monsters, the Duat existed to protect continuity. It was a buffer between order and nothingness, a place where dangerous forces could exist without overwhelming the world. The Egyptians believed that darkness was not evil, it was unstable. Light was stable because it revealed structure. Darkness hid structure, and what is hidden can collapse if left unmanaged. The Duat was darkness managed. This is why the Duat had architecture. It had gates, rivers, caverns, guardians, and laws, not because the dead needed obstacles, but because instability needed containment. The Duat was not meant to be easy. It was meant to be precise. Every element within it served a function. Nothing existed randomly. Even danger was placed carefully, like fire in a furnace. Uncontrolled fire destroys. Contained fire purifies. The Duat contained what could not exist safely in daylight. This included the dead. This included chaos. This included the night journey of the sun itself. Every night, the solar god Ra entered the Duat. This alone tells us how the Egyptians understood it. If the greatest god could enter the Duat and return unharmed, then the Duat was not a realm of condemnation. It was a necessary passage. Ra did not descend as a conqueror. He descended as a traveler. His journey through the Duat was slow, deliberate, and dangerous, not because the Duat opposed him, but because night resisted movement. Darkness thickens, time stretches, identity blurs. The Duat was the place where these effects were regulated. The Egyptians believed that without the Duat, the sun would be consumed by inertia. It would slow, stall, and dissolve into stillness. Dawn would never come again. The Duat ensured that morning remained possible. In this sense, the Duat existed before human death gained meaning. It was first a cosmic solution. Only later did it become a human one. When humans began to die, the Duat was already waiting. This is why the dead did not fear entering it. They were not trespassers. They were participants. The Duat treated souls the same way it treated gods, not with mercy, but with structure. To survive within it, one needed alignment, knowledge, and patience, not strength, not bravery. Understanding mattered more than courage. This belief shaped everything about Egyptian funerary culture. Tomb walls were covered with maps of the Duat. Spells described its regions. Names of gates were recorded carefully. These were not prayers. They were navigation tools. The Egyptians did not believe the Duat changed for each soul. It did not respond emotionally. It did not adapt to personal stories. It existed independently, like night itself. You did not ask the Duat to be kind. You learned how it worked. This removed fear. Fear arises from unpredictability. The Duat was many things, but unpredictable was not one of them. Even its dangers were known. The Duat was dangerous in the way deep water is dangerous, not hostile, but indifferent to ignorance. A swimmer who understands the current survives calmly. One who panics drowns. The Egyptians taught calm. They taught preparation. They taught repetition. This is why the Duat was described again and again across centuries with remarkably little change. Stability was proof that the system still functioned. Altering it would introduce risk. The Duat also explains why the Egyptians did not imagine a final end to existence. Endings implied waste. Waste implied disorder. Disorder was unacceptable. Instead, everything entered cycles. Life entered death. Death entered the Duat. The Duat returned the sun to dawn. The Duat returned the dead to ordered continuation, or removed them entirely if they could not stabilize. Nothing lingered without purpose. This is why the Duat was never simply the underworld. It was not beneath life, it was behind it. Always present, always active, always unseen. Even the living brushed against it nightly in sleep. The Egyptians believed sleep was a minor descent into the Duat. Consciousness loosened, the senses dimmed, dreams moved freely through hidden spaces. To wake safely was to return from a shallow passage. This belief made sleep sacred, and it made the Duat familiar, not frightening. Familiarity softened fear. This is why the Duat could be used as a place of rest rather than horror in Egyptian storytelling. It was slow, heavy, quiet, filled with long spaces and repetitive forms. The Duat was not loud. Loudness belonged to life. The Duat absorbed noise and returned silence. This silence was not emptiness. It was containment. A silence full of structure, like a sealed chamber holding something delicate. At the heart of his structure sat Osiris, not yet as judge in our story, but as stabilizer. His presence ensured that the Duat did not drift, that it remained centered, that its rules held. But before judgment, before scales, before thrones, the Duat existed simply as the place where night works. And that is how it should be understood. Not as a threat, not as a punishment, but as the hidden architecture that allows the universe to rest without falling apart. As you listen, allow your thoughts to slow the way the sun slows at dusk. Nothing is ending. Nothing is being taken away. Everything is simply entering the Duat temporarily, and it will return when it is ready. No soul rushed into the Duat. Entry was never sudden. The Egyptians believed that nothing meaningful begins with haste, especially not death. Just as the sun slowed before touching the horizon, the soul slowed before crossing the threshold. Entry into the Duat unfolded gradually, like a door opening in stages. First, separation. Breath left the body, sound faded, weight dissolved, but awareness did not disappear. It thinned. The Egyptians believed that at this moment the soul hovered close to the body, not trapped, not free, but suspended. This pause mattered. It allowed identity to loosen without tearing. A sudden break would spatter the self. The Duat did not accept scattered things. Only what could hold form was allowed to pass. This is why burial rites were slow and deliberate. Oils were applied. Linen was wrapped. Names were spoken repeatedly. Each act prepared the soul for entry, not survival. Entry was not automatic. It was permitted. The threshold of the Duat was marked by gates, not physical doors, but moments of recognition. The soul had to understand where it was going. Ignorance created resistance. Knowledge created flow. The Egyptians believed that the first gates did not block the soul. They tested orientation. Did the soul still cling to the living world? Did it resist stillness? Did it attempt to turn back? Turning back was dangerous. Not because it was forbidden, but because the living world could no longer hold the soul's shape. Returning would stretch identity thin, causing confusion, fear, and eventual dissolution. So the Duat gently pulled the soul forward. Guidance was present, but not forceful. This is where Anubis appeared, not as a judge, but as a stabilizer. Anubis did not drag souls into the Duat. He aligned them. His presence reminded the soul how to remain coherent without a body. Anubis was associated with thresholds because thresholds are fragile. Cross too quickly and you fall. Cross too slowly and you remain stuck. He ensured balance of movement. The Egyptians imagined the entry path as quiet and dim, not dark with terror, but dim with depth. Light did not vanish completely. It softened, edges blurred, time stretched. This stretching was intentional. The Duat slowed time to prevent shock. Souls that entered gently retained clarity. Souls that resisted became distorted. Distortion attracted dangers, not punishments, but natural consequences of misalignment. The gates of the Duat were named. Naming was essential. To speak a gate's name was to acknowledge its function. The Egyptians believed unnamed spaces were unstable. Naming stabilized passage. This is why funerary texts listed gate names carefully. The soul did not say, "Let me pass." It said, "I know where I am." Knowing was permission. Each gate represented a transition in state rather than distance. Passing through one gate did not move the soul forward in space. It changed the density of being. With each gate, attachment weakened, memory softened, urgency dissolved. This was not loss, it was preparation. The Duat could not process urgency. It functioned on patience and repetition. A hurried soul disrupted flow like debris in a river. The Egyptians taught calm because calm aligned with the Duat's rhythm. Beyond the first gates, the soul encountered guardians. These were not monsters in the dramatic sense. They were filters, beings whose presence tested consistency. A soul that contradicted itself could not remain intact near them. A soul that spoke truthfully passed without incident. This is why honesty mattered in Egyptian morality. Lies were not punished morally. They were structurally unstable. A lying soul fractured under pressure. The Duat did not expose lies. It made them unsustainable. As the soul moved deeper, sound diminished further. Speech became internal. Thought slowed into long, continuous awareness. The Duat encouraged this state because rapid thought fragmented identity. Slow awareness held shape. This is why the Duat was associated with silence, not emptiness, silence as containment. At this stage, the soul joined a current. The Egyptians often described this as a river or a boat, not because water was literal, but because flow was the closest human analogy. The soul was carried, but not helplessly. Carrying and choosing happened together. Every night, the solar god Ra entered the Duat along this same current. The Egyptians believed that human souls traveled alongside gods, not as equals, but as participants in the same system. This belief removed loneliness from death. The Duat was never empty. It was occupied continuously by movement, passage, and quiet labor. Souls did not arrive at once. They merged gradually. The Duat absorbed them the way night absorbs sound, softly, without disruption. The deeper the soul entered, the less it resembled a living being and the more it resembled a pattern. This was necessary. The Duat did not process personalities. It processed configurations. This is why Egyptian funerary art is stylized. The goal was not realism, but consistency. Consistency allowed the soul to remain legible to the system. Legibility was survival. Illegible souls dissolved. The Egyptians believed that once fully inside the Duat, fear became impossible. Fear required anticipation of harm. Harm required unpredictability. The Duat was predictable. What remained was awareness without urgency. This state is difficult to describe in modern language, but the Egyptians returned to the same metaphor repeatedly. Night travel. At night, movement is slower. Sounds carry differently. Boundaries soften. Nothing demands immediate action. The Duat extended the sensation infinitely. Entry was complete when the soul no longer resisted this pace. At that point, the Duat accepted it fully. No announcement, no declaration, just inclusion. This is why the Egyptians did not imagine death as a dramatic entry. There were no gates slamming shut, no proclamations, no trumpets. Death entered the Duat the same way evening enters the world. Quietly, gradually, without disruption. As you listen, imagine this pace. Nothing rushes you forward. Nothing pulls you back. You are simply entering a space designed to hold movement safely until it's ready to continue. The Duat does not hurry, and neither do you. Deeper within the Duat, the path did not narrow, it organized. What felt at first like a single descent gradually separated into regions, each with its own rhythm, its own pressure, its own purpose. The Egyptians did not imagine this division as geography in the human sense. These were not places you reached by distance. They were conditions you entered. The Duat expressed itself through elements the living already understood: water, stone, fire. But here, these elements did not behave as they did in the daylight world. They behaved according to function, not instinct. Rivers flowed, but not to nourish crops. Caverns opened, but not to shelter godis. Fire burned, but not to punish. Everything existed to regulate passage. The rivers of the Duat were the first to appear. They were slow and dark, moving without sound. The Egyptians believed these rivers carried memory rather than water. To step into them was to feel recollection loosen its grip. This was not loss. It was lightening. Souls entered the current gently, allowing unnecessary weight to dissolve. Regret, urgency, and unfinished desire could not remain intact here. They were too heavy, too irregular. The river accepted only what flowed evenly. This is why the Egyptians compared death to crossing water. Water does not resist. It receives, but it also reveals imbalance. A struggling swimmer disrupts the surface. A calm one moves without trace. The Duat's rivers responded the same way. Calm souls passed without disturbance. Agitated souls created turbulence. Turbulence attracted attention, not from judges, but from forces of correction. Beyond the rivers lay caverns, vast, silent chambers carved into darkness. These caverns did not confine, they slowed. Sound vanished here, direction softened. The soul felt suspended, as if movement had been briefly paused. The Egyptians believed these caverns existed to prevent collapse through speed. Too much momentum damaged coherence. Caverns absorbed momentum the way thick walls absorb heat. Inside them, the soul learned to remain still, without fear. This was a skill. Not all souls arrived knowing it. Those who resisted stillness felt pressure. Not pain, pressure. The Duat encouraged surrender to quiet. The longer the soul accepted stillness, the lighter. The Egyptians taught that stillness was not emptiness. It was alignment. After the caverns came fire. This is the element most misunderstood. The lakes of fire in the Duat were not places of torment. They were zones of purification, fields of intense clarity. Fire here did not burn flesh, it burned instability. The Egyptians believed that fire revealed truth by removing distortion. A coherent soul passed through fire unchanged. An incoherent one shed fragments until nothing stable remained. Fire did not attack, it exposed. This is why the Duat could contain fire safely. Fire was dangerous only when uncontrolled. Here it was contained perfectly, like a ritual flame that never spread beyond its boundary. Some texts describe souls drinking from fire. This was not masochism. It was calibration. To absorb fire was to equalize inner structure with cosmic order. Fire refined awareness, the way heat refines metal, slowly, evenly, without rage. Moving among these elements were beings the Egyptians described as serpents, guardians, and watchers. These were not enemies. They did not chase. They did not pursue. They observed. Their presence alone tested consistency. A soul that contradicted itself could not remain near them without discomfort. A soul that flowed evenly passed unnoticed. This is why the Duat was filled with eyes in Egyptian art. Seeing did not imply judgment. Seeing implied verification. Nahum hid here, but nothing was accused either. The Egyptians believed the Duat required verification because unverified elements destabilized systems. Verification restored confidence. Even the great solar god Ra moved through these regions nightly. His bark glided across the rivers, paused in the caverns, and passed through fire, not to be tested, but to maintain alignment. If Ra skipped these processes, dawn would fail. The Duat did not exempt even gods from regulation. This knowledge comforted the Egyptians. If the gods submitted to order, then order was trustworthy. Fire did not single out the wicked. It corrected the unstable. Rivers did not drown the fearful. They slowed the hurried. Caverns did not trap. They taught patience. Nothing in the Duat rushed. Everything waited for readiness. This is why the Egyptians did not imagine screaming souls or endless torment. Noise implied struggle. Struggle implied resistance to process. Resistance exhausted the self. The Duat removed resistance gently. As souls moved through these regions, identity simplified. Not erased, simplified. What remained was essence without excess. The Duat did not require perfection. It required coherence. A coherent soul could pass through any element without harm. An incoherent one dissolved naturally. No punishment, no cruelty, only physics. This perspective changes everything. The Duat was not moral theater. It was cosmic engineering. And engineering favors consistency over emotion. By the time the soul passed beyond fire, it felt lighter, not elevated, but settled. Fear no longer found traction. Fear requires uncertainty, and uncertainty could not persist here. What remained was awareness stretched thin and wide, like a calm night sky. This is why the Duat was suitable for sleep. It did not excite, it absorbed. As you imagine these rivers, caverns, and fires, notice how none of them demand reaction. They do not rush you. They do not threaten you. They wait. And waiting, when nothing is demanded, becomes rest. The Duat was built for this rhythm. And now, deeper still, the path continues toward movement that happens only once per night, and only with perfect timing, toward the slow journey of the sun itself. Every night, the Duat came alive, not because the dead arrived, but because the sun did. The ancient Egyptians believed that when the sun touched the western horizon, Ra did not disappear. He changed vessels. The blazing disk of daylight transformed into a quiet bark, and that bark entered the Duat to begin a journey that determined whether morning would ever return. This journey was not symbolic. It was essential. Without it, time would stop. Ra's passage through the Duat was divided into 12 hours, each one a distinct region with its own dangers, beings, and laws. These hours were not measured by clocks. They were measured by transformation. Each hour altered Ra slightly, stripping away exhaustion, restoring strength, and realigning him with order. At the beginning of the journey, Ra was weakened. Daylight drained him. Creation itself was heavy. The Duat existed so that Ra could survive his own power. In the first hours, Ra moved slowly through shadowed waters. Gods accompanied him, not as servants, but as specialists. Each knew a portion of the Duat. Each understood a segment of the night. Their presence ensured that the bark followed the correct path. If the path was missed, dawn would fail. This was not an exaggeration in Egyptian thought. The universe did not run automatically. It required nightly maintenance. Ra's journey was that maintenance. As the bark moved deeper, Ra encountered regions of silence where even gods spoke softly. Here, words carried weight. Incorrect speech could alter direction. This is why hymns and spells were memorized precisely by priests. They were not poetry. They were support. The most dangerous threat during the journey was not darkness. It was stagnation. If Ra slowed too much, night would extend indefinitely. The Duat countered this with movement regulated by opposition, and opposition had a name: Apophis. Apophis was not evil in a moral sense. He was the embodiment of resistance. He did not seek to rule. He sought to halt, to stop motion, to freeze time. Each night, Apophis attempted to block Ra's bark, coiling around the river of the Duat, drinking its waters, creating stillness so absolute that movement became impossible. The Egyptians did not imagine this as a dramatic battle. It was a cosmic struggle of endurance. Ra did not destroy Apophis permanently. He could not. Chaos cannot be erased. It can only be restrained. Each night, Apophis was cut, burned, pierced, and driven back. Not defeated, but reduced. This mattered. If Apophis were destroyed, the universe would lose resistance, and order would collapse into rigidity. If Apophis won, movement would cease entirely. Balance required repetition. So every night, the struggle occurred again. The Duat was designed to host this conflict safely, far from the living world. Chaos could express itself fully without tearing reality apart. This is why the Duat contained monsters, not to punish the dead, but to absorb forces that could not exist in daylight. As Ra moved from hour to hour, he encountered gates guarded by beings whose names were known only to gods and the prepared dead. These guardians did not attack Ra. They acknowledged him, verified alignment, and allowed passage. Recognition mattered more than power. Ra did not force his way through the Duat. He was allowed through because he belonged there. At the midpoint of the journey, Ra reached the deepest region of the Duat. Here, light was absent, but order remained. This was where Osiris resided, still, silent, enthroned. Ra did not rule the Duat. Osiris did, and yet they were not rivals. Ra brought renewal. Osiris brought stability. Their meeting ensured that regeneration did not become chaos, and stability did not become stagnation. In this moment, Ra absorbed strength from Osiris, not energy, but permission to continue. The Egyptians believed this meeting was the axis of existence. If Ra failed to reach Osiris, dawn would not follow. If Osiris rejected Ra, the dead would lose order. This never happened, because the system held. After this meeting, the journey shifted. Ra began to change. His weariness lifted. His form brightened gradually. The bark moved faster, more confidently. Resistance weakened. Apophis was driven away once more. The final hours of the journey were quieter. Fewer dangers appeared. The Duat itself seemed to open, releasing Ra upward toward the eastern horizon. The darkness thinned. Time began to accelerate again. At the final gate, Ra transformed, not suddenly, gradually. The bark dissolved. The disk reformed. Light returned, not as conquest, but as completion. Dawn was not victory over the Duat. It was the Duat releasing what it had safely carried. This is why the Egyptians did not fear night. Night was not absence. It was work. Sacred, necessary work that happened out of sight. The Duat was busiest when the world slept, and sleep mirrored this journey. When humans slept, their awareness loosened, their thoughts slowed, their inner chaos settled. The Egyptians believed that sleep was a small echo of Ra's passage, dangerous only if resisted. This belief transformed sleep into trust. You did not fight night, you entered it. Just as Ra did. Every morning proved the system still worked. The sun returned. Order held. The Duat closed again, silent and unseen, waiting for the next descent. And so the Egyptians rested, not because they believed nothing happened in darkness, but because they believed Everything important was already being handled. At the deepest point of the Duat, movement slowed to its quietest form. Not stopped, balanced. Here, paths no longer twisted, rivers no longer pulled, fire no longer tested. Everything that moved elsewhere in the Duat gradually aligned toward a single, unmoving presence. This was the domain of Osiris. The Egyptians did not imagine Osiris ruling the Duat through command or force. He did not patrol the regions or issue orders to its guardians. He did not pursue souls or summon them aggressively to judgment. He remained. Remaining was enough. Osiris sat at the center of the Duat because the Duat required a point that did not change. Everything else within it, souls, gods, night, fire, water, was transitional. Without a fixed center, transition would become drift. Drift was dangerous. So Osiris did not move. He sat enthroned, wrapped, silent, and complete in his stillness. His body bore the marks of death and restoration. His form was neither living nor decaying. It existed beyond those categories. This was precisely why he belonged here. The Egyptians believed that death could not be ruled by a god who had never died. Authority in the Duat came not from power, but from experience. Osiris had been fragmented, reassembled, and placed permanently beyond life. He understood the condition of the dead because he shared it. This made his presence stabilizing rather than threatening. Souls approaching the center of the Duat did not feel fear intensify. Fear required anticipation of harm. Near Osiris, anticipation faded. Outcomes were already decided by alignment, not emotion. Osiris did not decide who arrived. The system brought them. He did not argue with the scale. He accepted its result. This acceptance mattered. The Egyptians imagined Osiris as the final confirmation that everything which passed through the Duat had reached its proper state. By the time a soul stood before him, it was already prepared. Nothing abrupt occurred here. No surprises. No reversals. Osiris's throne was positioned not above the Duat, but within it. This was intentional. He was not elevated beyond death. He was embedded inside it. His authority did not transcend the system. It completed it. The hall of Osiris was not loud. It was vast, orderly, and quiet. Pillars stood in symmetrical rows. Light was present, but subdued. Sound carried slowly, as if absorbed by the air itself. This environment reflected Osiris's function. Nothing rushed. Nothing resisted. Everything that entered slowed naturally. Osiris did not speak often in Egyptian texts. Silence was not absence of authority. It was the clearest sign of it. A system that speaks constantly is unstable. A system that holds without commentary endures. The Egyptians trusted Osiris because he did not persuade. He received. This reception extended beyond souls. Even gods acknowledged Osiris's position. As Ra passed through the Duat each night, he paused at the center. This pause was not submission. It was coordination. Ra brought movement and a renewal. Osiris ensured that movement did not unravel what had already been placed. Their relationship was not hierarchical. It was complementary. Without Ra, the world would stagnate. Without Osiris, it would dissolve. Together, they formed a cycle that required neither dominance nor conflict. This is why Osiris was never depicted struggling against chaos directly. That role belonged to other gods. Osiris did not fight disorder. He outlasted it. The Egyptians believed chaos exhausted itself against stillness. What raged eventually slowed. What resisted eventually settled. Osiris did not need to defeat chaos. He waited until chaos lost momentum. This belief shaped how Egyptians understood death emotionally. Death was not a battle to be won or lost. It was a state to be entered and held correctly. Resistance only prolonged instability. Acceptance shortened the path. Osiris represented acceptance without surrender. He did not dissolve into nothingness. He remained intact. This made him the ideal anchor for the Duat. Souls that reached Osiris did not feel watched in the human sense. They felt contained. Containment here was not confinement. It was belonging within a structure that would not collapse. The Egyptians valued this deeply. A collapsing afterlife was worse than no afterlife at all. Continuation without order was terror. Osiris guaranteed order. This is why he was associated with green, the color of renewal, but also with linen, burial, and stillness. He united growth and cessation without contradiction. In life, growth required motion. In death, growth required stability. Osiris embodied the second truth. The central position of Osiris also meant that the Duat was not endless. Endless space implied wandering. Wandering implied anxiety. The Duat had a center so that everything had a reference point. Even souls who would not continue beyond judgment were stabilized briefly here. Their dissolution did not occur in panic or confusion. It occurred within order, without violence. This mattered to the Egyptians. Even annihilation had to be orderly. Osiris ensured that nothing ended chaotically. From the center of the Duat, paths led outward again. Not back to life, but toward resolution. Some paths continued into the fields of reeds. Others led to quiet erasure. All paths were known. Nothing was accidental. This predictability removed drama from death. There was no need for terror when outcomes followed alignment so closely. One lived knowing that nothing waited beyond death except placement. Osiris did not offer comfort in words. He offered comfort through consistency. Every generation encountered the same Duat. Every soul faced the same structure. Kings and farmers alike arrived under the same conditions. Status did not alter architecture. Wealth did not bend corridors. Only coherence mattered. This equality strengthened belief. A system that favors no one unjustly survives longer than one that promises special exceptions. Osiris offered none. He did not save. He did not condemn. He kept the dead where they belonged, kept the Duat from drifting, kept night from becoming endless, kept the cycle intact. As you imagine Osiris at the center, notice how little effort is required. Nothing presses forward. Nothing pulls away. The system holds itself. This is the calm the Egyptians trusted. Not the calm of emptiness, the calm of a structure that no longer needs adjustment. And from this still center, the journey continues outward, toward judgment completed, toward resolution finalized, toward a place where souls either remain in quiet continuity or gently cease. Judgment in the Duat did not arrive like a verdict. It arrived like a moment of clarity. After the long passage through rivers, caverns, and fire, After the night journey of the sun and the stillness at the center, the soul did not stand accused. It stood revealed. Nothing new was discovered here. Everything that mattered had already taken shape. The Egyptians believed judgment was not an event that changed the soul. It was an event that recognized it. The hole where judgment occurred was wide and balanced. Columns rose evenly. Space felt measured rather than imposing. There was no crowd, no noise, no urgency. Judgment required quiet to function. At the center of this hole sat Osiris, unmoving as he always was. He did not preside in the way a human judge presides. He did not question. He did not persuade. His role was not to decide, it was to receive the outcome. The process itself was overseen by Anubis. Anubis guided the soul gently forward, not as a captor, but as a technician of thresholds. He understood how to move between states without causing fracture. Before the scale, the soul did not plead. It prepared. The heart was brought forward, not as an organ, but as a record. To the Egyptians, the heart carried the imprint of a life's alignment, not emotions alone, but patterns of action, restraint, and consistency. The heart remembered what the mind might excuse. Opposite the heart rested the feather of Ma'at, light, exact, unbending. Ma'at was not mercy. She was order itself. Her feather did not judge behavior. It measured coherence. A heart shaped by balance rested evenly. A heart shaped by distortion pulled downward. The scale did not sway dramatically. It responded subtly. A balanced heart felt almost weightless. An unbalanced one did not crash. It failed to settle. This distinction mattered. Judgment was not violent. It was precise. Nearby stood Thoth, recording the result. Thoth did not interpret the scale. He wrote what it showed. Writing fixed the outcome into the fabric of the Duat. Once written, it could not be revised. The Egyptians trusted writing because writing did not argue. It preserved. If the heart aligned with the feather, the soul experienced no surge of joy. Joy belonged to life. What followed was permission. Permission to pass beyond judgment into continuation. If the heart did not align, there was no outcry, no condemnation. The process moved on. Waiting at the edge of the hall was Amit. Amit did not rush forward. She did not threaten. She existed as a boundary rather than an executioner. Her role was final. The Egyptians did not imagine Amit inflicting suffering. She removed instability. A soul that could not settle could not be allowed to continue. Continuation without coherence would damage eternity itself. So Amit consumed what could not be held. This was not punishment. It was resolution. Where the soul that passed the scale, judgment felt almost anticlimactic. There was no announcement, no reward bestowed. The soul simply found that resistance had ended. Movement resumed naturally, flowing toward a place designed for endurance. For the soul that failed, judgment was brief. A system did not linger. Lingering prolonged instability. Resolution occurred swiftly and without spectacle. This efficiency was intentional. The Egyptians feared lingering more than endings. The judgment hall existed to prevent lingering. Osiris did not react to either outcome. His stillness ensured neutrality. A reacting judge could be swayed. Osiris could not. His presence confirmed that judgment belonged to the system, not to personality. This is why the Egyptians did not pray for Osiris's favor before judgment. Favor implied preference. Preference introduced imbalance. Instead, they prepared their hearts in life. Life was where judgment was shaped. Death was where it was acknowledged. The famous declarations spoken by the soul, the statements of what it had not done, were not excuses. They were calibrations. Speaking them aligned memory with reality. If spoken falsely, they increased distortion rather than removed it. Truth stabilized. Falsehood weighed down. The Duat did not punish lies. It could not support them. Once judgment concluded, the hall released the soul. Paths opened or closed smoothly. There was no sense of being expelled or admitted. Movement continued according to compatibility. The Egyptians believed this design made fear unnecessary. Fear caused the heart to distort. Distortion endangered outcome. Calm preserved coherence. This is why so much Egyptian funerary art emphasizes calm faces and formal posture. Emotional excess was dangerous in the Duat. Composure was protective. Judgment was not something to dread if one lived attentively. It was something to complete. And once completed, nothing more was demanded. The Duat did not ask the soul to improve, repent, or transform further. Those processes belonged to life. Death finalized the pattern. This finality brought peace. Not because outcomes were always pleasant, but because outcomes were final. No appeals, no uncertainty, no endless waiting. Judgment and passage were designed to end anxiety, not create it. As you imagine this hall, notice how quiet it is. No raised voices, no confrontation, only balance finding its level. This is how the Egyptians imagined justice at its purest. Not dramatic, not emotional, simply accurate. And once accuracy was achieved, the system moved on, gently, steadily, toward the final regions of the Duat, where continuation or quiet ending awaited without disturbance. The ancient Egyptians did not fear the Duat. This surprises many people. They described it with fire, serpents, gates, and darkness, yet fear was not the emotion these images were meant to produce. Fear belonged to chaos, to the unknown, to places without rules. The Duat was the opposite of that. It was known. The Egyptians feared disorder far more than death. Disorder meant collapse of crops, of kingship, of memory, of the self. Death, when structured, could be endured. Night, when guided, could be trusted. The Duat was trusted because it worked. Every night, the sun entered it and returned. Every morning proved that the system held. If the Duat were dangerous in the sense of being hostile or arbitrary, dawn would be unreliable. But dawn came, always. This reliability shaped how the Egyptians understood darkness. Darkness was not absence. It was activity hidden from view. Important work happened there. Work that did not require observation to succeed. The Duat was where that work took place. For the dead, this meant something essential. They were not abandoned. They entered a system already in motion, already tested, already proven by gods themselves. They did not face a new or experimental realm. They followed a path worn smooth by repetition. This repetition removed terror. The Egyptians did not imagine the Duat reinventing itself for each soul. It did not adapt to personality. It did not react emotionally. It did not improvise. The Duat offered structure in abundance. It had maps. It had names. It had sequences. Even its dangers were consistent. A known danger is easier to accept than an unknown mercy. Mercy might fail. Structure does not. This is why Egyptian funerary texts focused on knowledge rather than prayer. They did not ask the Duat to be gentle. They assumed it would be exact. What mattered was readiness. Readiness replaced fear. The Duat also was not eternal wandering. It had an endpoint. Souls moved through it toward resolution. Whether that resolution was continuation or quiet ending, it was final. Finality mattered. Endless uncertainty is exhausting. The Egyptians believed exhaustion distorted the soul. The Duat removed exhaustion by bringing process to completion. This belief shaped their relationship with sleep as well. Sleep was not feared as a loss of control. It was a nightly rehearsal for trusting hidden systems. One closed the eyes, believing that breathing would continue, that the heart would keep rhythm, that waking would return. Night after night, this trust was rewarded. The Duat extended that trust beyond life. Even judgment, which modern audiences imagine as terrifying, was not framed that way. Judgment was not confrontation. It was measurement. Measurement does not accuse, it reveals. Revelation without drama is easier to effect. Beyond judgment lay either structured continuation or peaceful dissolution. Neither involved torment. Neither involved chaos. Both preserved order. This is why the Egyptians could live without obsession over death. They prepared carefully, yes, but they did not panic. Panic would undermine preparation. They trusted that if life was lived attentively, death would unfold predictably. The Duat did not promise happiness. It promised placement. Everything had a place. Everything arrived where it belonged. Nothing was lost randomly. Nothing drifted endlessly. This belief brought calm. Even the monsters of the Duat were not frightening in the way later demons were frightening. They had names, roles, and limits. What has limits can be endured. Limitless threat cannot. The Egyptians placed limits everywhere. On gods, on chaos, on death. The Duat was the place where limits held strongest. This is why it could be used, even today, as a setting for rest rather than fear. Its rhythms are slow. Its movements are deliberate. Its outcomes are known. Nothing jumps out. Nothing remembers you personally. Nothing demands emotion. The Duat simply operates. As you listen to these myths now, in the quiet, you are closer to how the Egyptians themselves engaged with them. Not as entertainment, not as horror, but as reassurance that unseen systems were functioning correctly, that night had a purpose, that darkness was not empty, that rest was safe. The Duat was never meant to keep you awake. It was meant to let you sleep. Because while you sleep, the sun continues its journey. Order continues its work. Structures hold. Paths remain open. Nothing needs your attention. Nothing requires your fear. If you'd like more long, calm journeys through ancient myths designed for sleep and quiet listening, subscribe to the channel and like the video so these stories can continue accompanying your nights. For now, let the Duat close gently. Morning will come when it is ready.